I want to start with a quote from Ernest Holmes. He says, "Consider the spirit as a warm, pulsating, reciprocal thing. It presses against us, it flows through us. It is our intelligence. It is a great universal urge and surge. It is a warm, colorful thing. It cannot be put into words. It can only be felt." And I take from that, he's saying it's something we can come to for guidance and for direction. A power that responds to us, a light that's within us. And then another quick quote from him, he said, "God speaks every time a scientist discovers a new thing, every time an inventor invents a new thing." So I want to give you two examples. The first one comes from the book, The Passion for the Possible by Jean Houston. And she has a discussion with a scientist at the Rockefeller Institute. And this scientist says to her, "I am really good. I know my science." He said, "But sometimes it feels like when I go deeper, there's answers coming from a source from some other place." He said they're richer and they're more elegant, and occasionally it's something I have never even thought about. And when that happens, I say to myself, who is the who that thought of that? Who is the who that thought of that? I think that's what Holmes was talking about. And the other example I wanted to give you is from my own life. Last week, if you go on Facebook, those of you that are on Facebook, the assistant editor of Science of Mind magazine interviewed me for 5 minutes. And one of the questions she asked me is, when you write for us, what's your process? And what I told her was I write 3 different things for them. I write sometimes once a year, usually a feature article, or I write daily guides, or I have a column that I share with 2 other ministers, and I write 4 times a year. And so I told her, when I write the daily guides, I know what they are because they're my messages that I fit into 270 words, and I know how to do that. When I write a feature article, which actually I have one due this week, you give me the theme. So the one I have to write this week, which I haven't started on, is called Living from Divine Wisdom. So I have some guidance. And so what I do when I write the 2 of those, I meditate every day for an hour in the morning. I just sit down and I meditate for an hour, and then I go write. The column is something different. The column it's got an idea. It's Practical Prosperity, it's called. But I don't get a theme from them. What I get is a blank page when I sit down in front of my computer, and I got to come up with the ideas. I have to come up with the title. So I have a little bit different way when I write the column. I still meditate for the hour, but before I sit down and meditate, I just sit for 5 minutes or so, and I set the intention. When I meditate, either a title is going to come to me or a germ of an idea, and then I can go and I can sit down and I write it. And I'll just tell you, it's never failed. It has never failed. I sit there, I set that intention, and I go. And then it takes me no time to write. I usually never edit. The whole article comes out, and then the boss over here comes, and she fixes all the grammar. And I'm not a very good typist, and so Becky puts it in a good form for the people at Science of Mind magazine. But I think that's what Holmes is talking about. I'm going to give you another example. I hadn't really thought about this one until right now. When I first became a minister, one of our instructors told us, don't get caught up in the parade of Sundays. And by that she meant sometimes, particularly for new ministers, you can think to yourself, oh my God, I've got 52 weeks to come up with ideas. How how am I going to do that? And you freeze. And that happened to me when I first became a minister. I was doing a Wednesday night service, and I used to prepare it Monday or Tuesday. And what was happening to me on Monday, I would panic. And I would say, what if I don't get an idea? What if I don't get a talk? Am I going to get up there Wednesday night and say, nothing came to me? And it sounds funny, but it's very scary when you're in, and you're particularly new. And so I knew I had to do something else. And so what I started to do, I meditated on it, and I started to take a different view. Now, then it was Monday, now it's either Thursday or Friday. I look at it completely differently. I look at it as today is the day I get to spend all day with God. I pray, I meditate, and then I read all of the research that Becky has prepared. And out of this day with God, a talk comes. Now, I never had to get up here on a Sunday and say, oh, geez, nothing came, okay? And I think that's what Ernest Holmes is talking about. It always works. It always works. Even sometimes when I'm 3/4 of the way reading all of this stuff and I don't have very many notes, I never panic because I know the talk is in the other 25% that I haven't read yet. It always works. And so let me move on and say, I want to talk about Ernest Holmes' view on this for a while. He said, we will discover God when we come through discovering ourselves. And he said it comes from an absolute unity between us and God. And he said not something in the future, but one that exists right now, right here. And he said if there's anything we need to know, it's that the eternal is incarnated in us right now. That every moment God goes forth through its creation, through us. And to the degree that we speak the spiritual truth in our life, that's God speaking. And he said, and when we get to see this vision, we should claim our own divinity and demonstrate it every day. And so I want to stop for a minute because there's a misconception that I hear, even among some practitioners. Holmes isn't saying that we're all of God, all right? He's saying that we're divine because God is within us, but we're not all of God. In fact, when I do my prayer work, a lot of times I say that. I say, I know that I'm not all of God, but that God is all of me. And the example Holmes used, which I really like, he said, all ice is water, but not all water is ice, okay? All ice is water, but not all water is ice. So he's saying, we're part of that, and God is all of us, but he's not saying, we can go out and, I can't go out and create a tree. At least I've never tried doing that. And he also said, don't make any concessions to appearances, that no matter what is appearing in our life, we don't have to make concessions to that. And we'll know a greater God when our inner consciousness has grown. That's when it will be. And then he says, a question everybody asks is, does God know me? Does God know me? And he said, that's a really deep question. And I hope this isn't too unsatisfying, everybody has to answer that for themselves. All right? I don't have a formula. We have to answer that for ourselves. And his belief was that God does know us. In fact, he said, God in us, as us, is that which we are. Is that which we are. And that our spiritual truth is greater than any condition. Meaning, we are too. So anything that shows up in our life, from a splinter to stage 4 cancer, we're greater. We're greater than that, because we have that divine presence in us. And he says when we turn to it, gradually we'll be able to see that it's working in every aspect of our life. So I read a really cute story this week that talks about how God works. And so it's a story about Abe, who's 85 years old and a pretty independent guy. And Abe has a stroke, a small stroke. And Abe's son insists that he move in with him. And Abe does, but he used to go walk in a park, and he misses the park. So one day, he decides that he's going to go for a walk in the park. He's going to go find it. And he becomes disoriented. He can't find it. And he sees a young boy named Timmy. And he didn't know the boy's name, but he goes over to him and he says, "Hey, son, I'm looking for this park. Can you help me find it?" And Timmy says, "Ordinarily, I would help you, but I'm really too busy now. I'm looking for God because I want to see why my parents are getting divorced." And Abe says to this little boy, "I need to find God too, because I want to find out why he's made me so useless." And then Abe says, "Maybe God's in the park. Let's go to the park." So they go to the park, and they sit down on a bench, and Timmy loses it. He starts to cry. And Abe takes both of his hands and holds Timmy's face. And he says, "I don't know why bad things happen, but I know you're not the cause. And I know you're a good boy, and your parents love you, and they always will love you, and you're going to be okay." Timmy hugs him and says, "I am so glad I saw you today. Thank you. Now I can go home." And he gets up and he starts to walk home, and he didn't know, but his mother was watching the whole scene, and she comes running over to him, see the guy, holding, and she says, "Who was that guy?" And Timmy says, "That was God." And his mother said, "Did he tell you he was God?" And Timmy says, "No, I know he was God, because when he held me and he talked to me, I felt better. And only God can do that." Now when Abe goes home, his son is annoyed because he's been gone and they don't know where he is. And his son says, "Where have you been?" And he says, "I was in the park talking to God." And his son said, "Really? How did you know it was God?" And he said, "Because when he held me, I didn't feel useless anymore." So, Jean Houston is a great writer, and she writes in an article I wrote, she said, in Scripture it says that God is closer than our breathing and nearer than our hands and feet. And she says, if we could drop our boundaries and know this for 1 minute, we would wake up like we were living in a dream. She said there would be such a powerful clarity in our life that we would know that we're in the presence of an artistic masterpiece. She's talking about the universe we live in and how it's, we would see it as an artistic masterpiece. And it reminded me when we lived in California, I was listening to a talk radio program one day, and the host was saying he had a nephew who was an agnostic, and he got into medical school. And this host was saying the first time in medical school his nephew looked through a microscope, he started to believe in God. Because what he came to was there couldn't be this order in the universe that was random. And Ernest Holmes says to not believe in God, to not believe in how things work out is like saying all of the works of Shakespeare were the result of somebody turning over all the letters in the alphabet and then coming out like that. And Gene Houston says that the chances are most of us have been yearning in our lifetime for something or someone to carry us home so we could hear who we really are. And she says, now it's your choice. The home you always longed for is within you. The kingdom is your birthright, and it's your splendid inheritance. So, Meister Eckhart said something like, the whatever it is you're searching for is searching for you, and that's what she's saying. And Dennis Merritt Jones, who's a religious science minister, looks at it the same way, but speaks to it in a different way. He says, you're here now because you're supposed to be. You arrive at the right moment, and you're a divine idea in the mind of God, and it's your turn to come and shine, and the party wouldn't be complete without you. And from the Catholic point of view, St. Augustine said when people would ask him, how do you know how God exists? He would say, I know because it's the restlessness in our heart, that no matter what we are and where we're up to, we never are filled up. And our hearts are restless until we rest in spirit. And so I want to tell you another story. And it's about a young Hindu boy. And when he's beginning school, he has part of his walk through is through a forest. And he's scared to walk through the forest. So he tells his mom how frightened he is. And his mom says, well, when you get to that part of the journey, why don't you talk to Krishna? So every day when this little boy walks to school, he talks to Krishna. And every day when he's coming home from school, he talks to Krishna, and it feels good. And his family is poor. So one day, when he's walking to school, he says to Krishna, today's our teacher's birthday, and everybody is going to bring her a present. I don't have anything to give her. And Krishna drops a pitcher of milk in front of him, and he says, give her this. So the little boy goes to school, and he gives the teacher the pitcher, and whenever they have the recess where they're going to celebrate this teacher's birthday, they have, whatever cookies and stuff, whatever Claudia brought, and the teacher starts to pour the milk. And what happens is, it automatically refills itself. There's no bottom to it. As much as she pours, there's more milk and more milk and more milk. And so she finally turns to him and she said, where did you get this pitcher? Who gave it to you? And this innocent little boy says, my friend Krishna. And the teacher gets very angry at him and says, how could you say that? How could you take God's name in vain? That's terrible. And all of the kids in the class go, yeah, your friend Krishna. And they start to mock him. And he starts to cry. And he calls out, he says, Krishna, Krishna, they don't believe me. Come, let them see you. And he hears a voice in his ear. And the voice says to him, whispers in his ear, when they have your faith, then they too shall see me. So I want to finish up. I want to talk about a couple of things that we could do to find God. And I got this from an article by somebody named Steve McSwain. And one of the things he says is change your thinking about yourself and about God. And he says, and this is, I kind of been saying this morning, he said, you're not separate from God, and so let go of your old ways of thinking. And he says, you can't find God in a book. And you can't find God in a church. He said, they are portals to God's presence, and God has lots of portals. He said, if you really want to find God, why look outside yourself when God is in here? The second thing he says is, there's a psalm that says, be still and know that I am God. And he said what that means, what be still means, is relax, let go, release control, and stop trying to find God. And he said, why? Because it's not necessary, because you can't find what's not lost. You can't find what's not lost. And the question, how do I find God, he said, is the wrong question, because God is already in you. And this wall of separation that we put up is an illusion, and it always will be. The presence you seek is the person you are. I really love that. The person you seek is the presence you are. And so I want to close with a quote from Ernest Holmes. He said, God is always God. No matter what our emotional storm or what our objective situation may be, there is always something hidden in the inner being that has never been violated. We may stumble, but always there is that eternal voice forever whispering in our ear, that thing which causes the eternal quest, that thing which forever sings and sings. God bless you. Thank you for being here.